is now 5:15, and I'm calling to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for Monday, January 23rd, 2023. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Please get a roll call.
Commissioner Miller,
Here,
Commissioner Hunsaker. Here. Commissioner Leopard,
Here,
Commissioner Bunch,
Good evening.
Commissioner Riles, Commissioner Cardoza,
present.
and Commissioner Bartholomew. Present.
thank you. So we need to approve the minutes of October 17, 2022 and November 14, 2022. Do we do those together or do we need to do them separately?
It's your choice.
Well, let's do them together.
Okay.
Let's approve the minutes of October 17, 2022 and November 14, 2022. Get a motion.
I move that we approve both sets of minutes.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. Abstain? Okay, Stacey abstained. Thank you. If this is from the public, a person who wanted to provide comments may first email written comments to the cbaa@cityofalbany.net, include your name before noon on the day of the meeting. To comment virtually during the meeting, register by emailing cbaa@cityofalbany.net before noon on the day of the meeting with your name, and the chair will call upon those who have registered to speak. Appear in person at the meeting and register to speak. Have any business from the public? Okay. Moving on to the public hearing. So it's next on the agenda is our legislative and quasi judicial public hearing regarding planning file CP-04-22 ETL. Have all commission members received a copy of the agenda packet materials? Are you familiar with the
Yes.
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 call to order this quasi judicial public hearing at 5:18 PM? Have no gavel. If you wish to testify, there were two options available which were described on the agenda. Do any members wish to declare a conflict of interest? Do any members wish to report an ex parte contact?
Just driving by, right?
Just driving.
I drove by.
Karen drove by?
We're not on site this yet, are we? For the ex parte
Ex parte, right.
communications.
No.
Okay. Do any members wish to abstain from participating in the proceedings? Does anyone wish to challenge the planning commission's right to determine this matter or the participation of any commission member in this hearing and decision? If so, please turn on your camera, raise your hand to be called upon, or if you're attended by phone, please unmute yourself and state your name so you can be called on. At this time, I call for the reading of the meeting procedures. Agenda for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all those wishing to testify, please be aware that you must raise an issue with enough detail to afford the planning commission and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue if you later want to raise that issue on appeal. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the approval standards that staff will describe or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or development code that you believe apply to the decision. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the planning commission may allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with enough detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
Thank you, David. This time I call for a staff report from project planner Jennifer Sapello.
Good evening. So this is CP 0422, ZC 0622, EA 0922, and SP 2322. It's a comprehensive plan and zoning map amendments, partition and site plan review. This application is request to partition the 4.8 acre property into one 3.3 acre parcel referred to as parcel 1 and a 1.53 acre parcel referred to as parcel 2. That applicant also proposes to amend the comprehensive plan map designation from general commercial to medium density residential and to change the zoning map designation from community commercial to residential medium density. Touched on. Parcel 1 will remain or will maintain the existing comprehensive plan map designation of general commercial and the zoning map designation of community commercial. The applicant has also applied for a site plan review to establish a 42-unit apartment complex upon the proposed parcel 2. The property is located at 2000 Queen Avenue Southeast. The applicant is Mega Foods Investments LLC, represented by land use consultant Laura LaRocca, Udell Engineering and Land Survey. The property in question has a comprehensive plan, map designation, general commercial. The only zones compatible with that designation are neighborhood commercial, community commercial, regional commercial, and office professional zones. The applicant proposes to amend the comprehensive plan designation to medium density residential, which allows residential single dwelling unit zones, residential medium density, residential medium density, residential medium, residential attached, mixed use zone, office professional, and neighborhood commercial zoning districts. To the north, east, and south, and west of the subject property is currently located within the residential comprehensive plan map designation. The subject property is currently located within the community commercial zoning district. The applicant proposes to amend the zoning map for parcel 2 from community commercial to residential medium density attached. The subject property bordered by properties with a residential medium attached zoning district to the east, south, and west. To the north would be commercial, which would be remain that Mega Foods parcel, but further north is more residential medium density attached. The partition would partition the 4.8 acre property into the 2 parcels. Parcel 1 would consist of 3.3 acres and remain in the general commercial comprehensive plan map designation in the community commercial zoning district. And parcel 2 would be created at 1.53 acres and to be located within the medium density residential comprehensive plan designation and zone residential medium density attached. The site plan review is for the proposed 42-unit apartment buildings that are to be located upon the parcel 2. The proposed development would provide 12 studio apartments, 18 one-bedroom apartments, and 12 two-bedroom apartments. If approved, parcel 2 will have a substation of multiple dwelling unit developments to the east and to the west, multiple dwelling unit development to the south, an open space consisting of Periwinkle Creek directly to the west with more additional multiple unit dwelling developments and the commercial to the north. This is a type 4 process with the decision-making criteria being the comprehensive plan amendment, ADC 2.220 of section 3, zoning map amendment of ADC 2.740, partition of ADC 11-180, site plan review in the ADC 2.450. This went out to agency notice and public notices. We did receive one comment that was submitted to you this evening that came in after the staff report was concluded. This is a planning commission recommendation for the city council's final decision. Each of these review criteria that were previously mentioned are addressed in the staff report. Public notice regarding this was mailed to property owners within 300 feet on December 30th of 2022. Staff report with exhibits was posted on the Planning Commission and Planning Projects homepage since January 17th of 23. The site was posted on January 13th of 2023 in 2 locations, one on Gary Street frontage and one on the Queen Avenue frontage. No written comments were received at the time of this hearing, but there was one that did come in. We received that. In conclusion, the staff analysis finds that evidence supports the contention that proposed parcel 2 is best suited for the requested medium density residential plan designation and the residential medium density attached zoning designation. As proposed, the submitted comprehensive plan amendment, zone map amendment, partition site plan review satisfy all the applicable review criteria outlined in the report. Therefore, staff recommends approval of request with modifications to condition 13 to include a buffer along the southern property line of parcel 2 as accidentally excluded from the staff report. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do any commission members have clarifying questions regarding the staff report? Go ahead, Donna.
First of all, I'd like to report a site visit. I somehow missed that as we were going through that, so I did visit the site. I do have a question. As I was looking at the layout of this, I noticed that they're planning to put the buildings on the southern part of the property and have the parking on the northern part. I thought it would actually work better to have the parking on the southern part and the buildings on the northern part, so that the people currently living in the Periwinkle Creek apartments would not be staring into this 3-story building looking over them. But I'm guessing the reason they couldn't do that is there's a sewer line or some sort of line that comes through that, and I'm guessing they are not allowed to build over the sewer line. Would that be correct?
Correct. So there is a sewer easement, and you're not allowed to construct over the sewer.
Okay, that would explain it. Also in Ms. Verba's letter, she references the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules from LCDC. Do those apply? And if not, why not?
So, sure.
So the city is still working on proposing some code amendments that we'll be looking at that during the spring. Right now, they're not in our development code. We anticipate that they will be by June 30th. And that also seems to be about the period of time that we would be obligated to do that. So this application was submitted before that in any event. So it's vested under existing rules as opposed to prospective ones later in the spring.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Did the bike rack situation get handled? I know they had to have half of it covered and it was going to be in the hallway of the apartments. Is that going to be okay?
So there is some building code that requires a curb. So at the time of development, when building permits are submitted, they may have to move the bike racks. It just depends on the ADA accessibility and how the final design comes out.
I can elaborate a little on that. So in this case, as well as some prior ones, it was proposed to put the bicycle parking underneath the stairway that would lead to the second floor. And for a while, that seemed to be a sensible place because it would be technically covered in that event. But what happens is that for ADA compliance, beneath the stairwell, you have to have curbing around the walkway that would go to either unit like on the bottom floor. So there's not a good way to get a bicycle up and over that curb, and it would create kind of a tricky hazard. So the building division discourages doing it like that. The curb is there so that somebody that's sight impaired can tell where the stairs are and not walk up into them. It didn't occur to us either until we did a site visit one time on another project, and then the building official was like showing us, it's like, oh, okay, then that makes sense. So
This hasn't been the case until more recently. Is that correct? Because I had never heard of it before, so I was a little confused. There were quite a few conditions on this site plan, and so that those conditions will have to be met before permits or construction happens.
Or
Or
occupancy.
occupancy. So some of them are worded as prior to the issuance of building permits, so those have to be fixed before they get their building permits. Other things can occur after they're submitted and their permit is issued, but it's before they can get occupancy.
So that would include like the landscaping buffer and the pathways and all those things that aren't.
Currently in the plan.
Yeah, because you don't want to plant all your landscaping and then start constructing. So that's
Mhm.
Well, there was one thing that was pointed out in this, on the backside, is that the silt loam is an issue for building on because of its slow, it doesn't allow any moisture to come in, and then it holds moisture up there right next to the foundation. Anyhow, but you understand.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you, David.
at the time a building permit is taken out on the actual dwelling units, the building division requires a soil analysis to be submitted
Before they,
before they get their building permit. They need to show that the soils can support it.
thank you. Okay,
Great. So we will now be taking public testimony. First from those in favor of application, followed by those in opposition or with concerns, and finally from anyone who is neutral. If anyone wishes to enter an exhibit into record as part of your testimony, please briefly describe the exhibit and then email it to the cbaa@cityofalbany.net. Written testimony that was submitted by the deadline via email have been uploaded to the city's website as part of the agenda package.
Madam Chair, there seems to be an omission here, but this is the time for the applicant to provide testimony. Sorry about that. I think there was another copy of this that was used.
I didn't get the original. Thank you, David, for catching that. No worries. Let's do what we need to do. Follow the, so it's time for the
applicant.
applicant.
Yeah. Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Laura LaRocque. I'm with Udell Engineering and Land Surveying. Our address is record of the application. I'm the applicant's representative this evening. So as Jennifer and David pointed out, this is a multi-part application. The first and foremost is a request to change the zoning designation on the lower portion of the property from a commercial zone to a residential zone so that multifamily development can occur. We took a look at the city's long-range planning, specifically the buildable land inventory, and it looks like that there is a need for high-density residential development in the city of Albany. So this would fit the long-range planning efforts of the city. The second part is to partition it. So parcel one largely contains what's commonly known as the old Mega Food store. This portion of the property is under common ownership as this parcel as well. There is plans to do some interior remodel to that building, likely just go through a building permit process down the road. The real development in the heart of this application is parcel 2. So it's the southern portion of the lot, which is if you were to drive out there now, it'd be south of where the parking lot is developed and kind of just a grassy area. Bordering the property to the south and east and west is all multifamily development, typically the 3-level mid-rise apartment complex that you are used to seeing. To the northeast of the proposed apartment is a utility substation. And then, of course, the existing development on the site. So the proposal is to divide the lot. With that, the parcel 2 would not have frontage on a public street, be accessed by a shared access easement. That driveway already exists today. It would just be recorded with a document to provide future property owners, if it was to change hands, rights to drive on the access way. As you mentioned, there is an existing sewer line. The engineers did take a look at relocating that, but the expense of relocating that line would have really been cost prohibitive. So we just worked with that in the overall design. The design of the site, it is infill development and it's quite long and narrow. So it's a little bit challenging when you start to layer all the city's regulations in there to make sure that you can meet all those code standards and have a nice project in the end. Overall, we're exceeding the requirements for parking that's on site for the number of units proposed. There's adequate open space. There'll be a children's play area for the city regulations. And also, as much as we could, we've set the building back from existing development on the property lines that we're able to. Included in that will be some landscaping and some swells that will have some vegetation as well to have kind of a buffer in those areas. You have lots of information in front of you today. I'm not going to read over those 100 and some odd pages of the document. I did want to run through a few conditions of approval just to get some clarity on some of those items. So give me a moment. I'm just going to pull those up. So on condition 1, there's 2 bullet points. And one of the conditions is that the final plat that there's a dedication of a public right of way of 10 feet wide easement for a multi-use path along the Geary Street frontage of parcel 1. So there's a very small portion of the site that actually has frontage on Geary Street. What's developed in that area now is already a multi-use path that goes along Periwinkle Creek and connects to the public right of way. In the staff report under finding 4.6 and conclusion 4.4, it's stated that there is a long-range project that's identified in the transportation system plan that talks about why this is needed. However, when you actually read the transportation system plan under the project number of I-18, it states that the purpose of that transportation improvement is to widen receiving lanes on Queen Avenue beyond the intersection, to install a 150-foot eastbound right turning lane on Queen, install flashing yellow arrows protected, permitted some sidewalk improvements for pedestrians. It really doesn't talk about why the dedication or multi-use path in that area. So at this point, I just encourage the Planning Commission to ask clarity from staff to make sure that we're achieving what the aim is on that particular condition of approval. If the intent is to simply have an easement over where there's an existing multi-use path on the properties to make sure that there's public rights to access that to the public right of way. Just like that, a little bit more clear in the conditions of approval. So conditions 2, 3, 4, 5, those are all pretty standard. It's just saying that, in the next phase of development, there's actually construction and engineered plans that are developed for the site and that they're meeting the city regulations through their permitting process. On condition 4, it talks about maximum lot coverage. And in the description in the staff report, it talks specifically that the site is very close to the maximum lot coverage. Specifically, it calls out that perhaps the children's play area might actually take the project over the maximum. I just wanted to point out in the development code, there is a definition for impervious surface area. Bear with me, I'll read it quickly into the record. That impervious surface, so what they're actually regulating, protecting, is to have some green space where water can essentially flow back to the ground table. On this one, it says any improved, altered, constructed surface which generally prevents infiltration of surface water, including but not limited to paved streets, gravel, paved areas such as parking lots, driveways, other treated surface, walkways, roofing surface. To me, that does not include bark chip, play area, play structure. It seems like there might be walkways, of course, for ADA access to those features. But in my mind, those child play areas should not be included because water does flow through those bark chip areas when they're designed. So again, I just want to make sure that when building plans are permitted, because it is such a very tight design site, that staff is interpreting the code, how the commission would like them to after reading that definition. And then, bear with me, there's one other one I'd like to just talk about. Let's see. And it comes down to the buffer. So in the narrative that was submitted to the city for approval, it looks at the codes, I guess, in 2 different ways. So I'll kind of explain the approach from my client's end and then kind of explain how city staff looked at that so that you can consider whether that condition of approval is necessary or not. So in the development code, it has standards that are specific to landscaping in a parking lot. So in my mind, when I take a look at the site, there's a building, multifamily building, and there's landscaping standards that would apply around the perimeter of that building. There's a parking lot that's associated with it. And there's very specific standards in the development code that apply to just the parking lot area. Those work together, but there are 2 different codes that have 2 different standards that are applied when you're looking there. I think that's an important distinction to be made because the maintenance and long-term care of a parking lot area is very different than around the perimeter of a building. Where the city is requesting the buffer to be placed is along a main travel aisle of the site. It'll continue to be a travel aisle of the site when the northern parcel redevelops or further develops. And my concern is that if there's trees planted in that area to a buffering standard, which is meaning more trees than normal and just a landscaping bay, that those trees may become a nuisance for maintenance. They might cause conflict with delivery trucks and things of that nature. So it's just kind of the long-term care of that site. When I look at the development code, there is a matrix in there. And in the matrix, it says, when you're proposing a specific use, you follow the matrix down. And if it abuts this, then this is the actual standard that applies. I think the difference between staff's interpretation on this and ours is that there's actually two proposed uses that is in the buffer matrix table. One talks about multifamily units and the other one talks about standards for the parking lot. When I read this, I look at the parking lot section of the building. I follow the buffer standard down and I see when a parking lot is constructed next to a commercial use, the table on the development code under 9.210-1 says that there's no buffer required. So that's not saying that there shouldn't be some space or there might be space or there might be landscaping. It's just saying that the buffer standards in the development code that say specific number of trees and plant vegetation and irrigation are not required when you have a parking lot that separates a commercial area. There's another way to look at this too. If you were to do this development in reverse and you built a multifamily development next to an existing parking lot, the code would only say that there's only a 5-foot buffer and some screening, so a 5-foot landscaping strip and a fence. So it seems a little bit impractical to me to apply the highest standard to the development due to the maintenance concerns of it. And just that when you're applying these standards, is how I would read the code. Any other way would be far lesser than what they're imposing with that condition of approval. Otherwise, I appreciate the city's really thorough job of writing staff report and applying those standards, taking the detailed look at the site, and we accept all the other conditions of approval. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions or comments that I might be able to add to the presentation. Yes, ma'am.
Well, is this an appropriate time to have the city respond to the concerns?
I'm not sure David has the schedule.
I believe, and then you need to open it up to public testimony first.
Okay, so that would come later.
Yes.
Okay. My other question is, do you know how far so I saw that there's like a 15-foot distance from the back side of your buildings to the southern border. Do you know then how far from that property line to the apartments that are just south of that?
I had that measurement early on. I think it follows the minimum setback in their area. I want to say it's about a 10 to 15-foot setback in that area.
Okay, so there'd probably be a 25 to 30-foot distance between that. And I know there's a row of trees that goes along that border line. Are you going to be able to construct the buildings without damaging those trees?
Let me pull up the existing conditions map. The treed area on the site, if I recall correctly, there's not a lot of trees on the subject property. They're to the south.
I think they're right along the border. I think they do belong to the Periwinkle Creek Apartments, but I think they're right along that border line.
Yeah. So, let me just try to get technology to work here. Okay. Yeah, on the existing condition, it does not show that any trees are on the parcel that is proposed to be developed. So they do look to be on the adjacent property to the south.
Okay, and your construction, we assume, would not interfere with.
That should be outside the drip line of those trees. Yeah.
That's all I had.
And I think that's interesting too, because that apartment complex, it does not appear to have a buffer placed on that, in that apartment complex to the south or the utility substation. So it's interesting to
Well, I
know
think
that the existing multifamily to the south does not have a screen buffer requirement.
So I don't know if
would
those
be imposed.
trees count as a buffer.
Some would, yeah.
perhaps. So,
Yeah. it's that code language. They, on a buffer, when they're talking about city code, they say, you know, it has to be 30 feet spacing and it has to be this tall. And so it really does provide a buffer against natural vegetation. That's all I have.
So David, where are we?
Questions?
Now it's time to open it up to public testimony.
So I'm not sure where I'm at anymore.
So you are able to ask questions of staff if you would like. There's an opportunity for those against, those neutral, and
So
then
do we need
rebuttal.
to go through the ritual of asking if there's,
If you'd like to, yes, you can ask staff questions at any time. So if you want to do that before accepting public testimony.
I would like to hear the staff response.
anyone else have any questions or comments want to hear from staff? Okay, staff. You're on.
What's the first question you'd like us to work on?
Well, I believe there were 3 conditions that she referred to, and I think the first one dealt with an easement or some such thing.
Right, condition 1, the dedication of the public right of way of a 10-foot wide easement for the multi-use path along the Gary Street frontage of parcel 1.
So if they are, I mean, there's a path that's there already. So I guess what are you asking them to do in addition to the path that's already there?
So
And it's funding 4.6.
Right. And so part of 4.6, the I-18 has occurred on the other side of the Queen. They widened Perry Rico Creek Trail. So the dedication of that 10-foot wide easement was a comment from Ron Irish to widen that easement. So I don't know if you walked that trail, it kind of comes up and it does a real hairpin turn to get to the intersection. And so the plan was to widen that, so they needed that 10 feet just to widen it, so it's not as much of a curve.
So now, I have to admit, I was struggling as I was reading this to figure out, you were talking about some proposed change to the intersection there or something to help something. And is this on the property that they're looking to develop, or is this on?
No, it would be
the-
on parcel 1.
Okay, so that's the property that's not being developed.
It's the subject of the partition.
Petition.
So that's where the relationship comes between the two parcels.
Okay. So I feel like I'm acting as an intermediary here. Is it possible for the two of you to simply talk? Yes, no?
So can I just ask this question to clarify?
Uh-huh.
There's this regulation of a 10-foot buffer on the north side
Okay.
of the parking lot. And that's in between the parking lot and another basically parking lot.
Correct.
And you want to have some sort of buffer in between that vegetation wise. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you're saying that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
Well,
same
here's the thing,
thing.
if there is a separation between multifamily and a parking lot of at least 5 spaces, the only other place you can put a 10-foot buffer is between the apartments and the apartments parking lot. See how it is in a verse? So,
I see what you're saying, because we're taking the entire apartment complex. But I don't understand because don't we usually have a buffer around the perimeter of a property?
we would,
Okay.
and they're contending that a 10-foot buffer is excessive at that location.
So you're talking about the 10-foot buffer at the north side of the property?
North side of proposed parcel 2.
Right. Okay, and that is, I think I'm not seeing your point. That would be a buffer between a parking lot and another parking lot.
Yes, but one distinction here is that just to the north of this property is still remaining a commercial zone. So if approved, this new apartment complex would be zoned RMA.
Right.
Whereas the buffer is needed between that kind of a development and a commercial development, which is still remaining a commercial zone. So we argue that a 10-foot buffer is reasonable here.
And there are more parking spaces than required. And
That's
so I
true.
was wondering, because there's that required 10-foot buffer, if that would, you'd have to alter the parking lot in order to get that 10-foot buffer. Because you have to have it on
You would.
that side of the,
So would, so that would essentially shrink the parking lot so that cars would not be able to maneuver as well. Is it going to then not satisfy parking lot requirements? Or, because this is a very narrow lot. If
There are-
it's-
I can answer that one.
there are no compact spaces. So, and they are allowed to have compact spaces. And so that means that it would be a shortened parking space. So they could possibly use compact spaces on that side and pull it in, or on either side, and create more space for the buffer. Because in some places, it's only 9 feet, so there's only 1 foot difference. And in some places, there's 7 feet, I think, or the smallest. But I mean, so there's a maximum of 3 feet that is required.
Yeah, so the travel aisles, so the passing lanes behind the parking stalls cannot be reduced. So what would likely happen is that they would try to take that top northern row of parking and make it compact if they can. The only kind of careful thing is you're also required to have accessible spaces, and those have to be a specific depth, which is greater than what a compact space would be. So likely where the distance would be taken out is the landscaping area in front of the building entrances. Or if possible, you would reduce the setback from the building to the south property line to make up the difference to have the buffer.
Isn't it?
So everything would shift.
Yeah,
downward
is it
to the south.
15? It's 15 feet.
It's 50 feet now.
Yeah, and you're only required 10 because
Yeah.
of.
So there would, and then there's extra space between the entrance sidewalk and the building frontages. So that might reduce by a foot or so as well.
So you took a foot there and you took a foot there. You have it. I'm excited about that.
And there was a second issue you had.
Yeah, so the issue, I guess, just quickly is they point to I-18 and the transportation system plan. It does not call out in I-15 that there's a need for a multi-use path area. It talks about a different project. Condition 6, a maximum lot coverage. I feel like there's a difference interpretation of what counts as impervious surface area. So that's not unclear at the time of building permit. I'd like to be clear that playground areas and park mulch and things of those would be treated as pervious. And then the parking lot buffer, I feel that the table allows no buffer to be required there. So I think that's more restrictive than what the code is intended.
So regarding the impervious surface area, if their play area, I guess this would have to be conditioned if their play area is bark chip, that would not count as impervious surface area, correct?
Correct. In the site plan submitted, it didn't mention what the ground area was. So it was more of a cautionary note saying, hey, you're at this, depending on what you do and any trails you put in, you might go over that.
Okay, so they agreed to make it bark chip, we're okay?
Well, I mean, at the time of, when it's submitted, that's where we would make sure that it goes, that it's 70 or less than 70%. So if it's 69.9, you're still good. It's just kind of, you're right on that boundary.
Okay, although if we are now enforcing a 10-foot buffer, that now counts as.
That counts as, yeah, that would take away from their, buffer, so that would bring
So
them down.
okay, that would solve the other problem. And then I don't know that we resolved the easement issue, so I guess I'm still not understanding. There's some construction in the future that's gonna happen, and this is all on parcel 1 that you are asking for a 10-foot easement. And on parcel 1, you don't want that 10-foot easement because of why?
The condition approval says that there's a 10-foot wide dedication along the frontage of Geary Street. So if you actually look at, and if there's an arrow that they could see, the multi-use path actually runs along Periwinkle Creek, not the would that be along Gary Street? So I'm concerned how the condition is written, that there might be a dedication of land that's taking land from, property owners' use and dedicating it to an easement for public use. That doesn't correspond with the need. I mean, first, I don't think it's identified in the transportation system plan that it's required. And second, I don't think that how it's described, it actually matches with the existing or a proposed multi-use path. Because it actually doesn't follow along the frontage of Gary Street. They said a 10-foot long dedication along the existing multi-use path, or if they tied it to a specific project that had multi-use path described in that area, I would feel more comfortable. But right now, it just feels like it's a very open to interpretation about a dedication of
It does,
private land.
it does seem confusing.
I can read what Ron's comments were, and it says, Albany's TSP includes a project that will make changes in add capacity to the Queen Avenue Geary Street intersection. One of the improvements that will occur with that project will be an approximately 50-foot long extension of a multi-use path along the west boundary of parcel 1, from the north bank of Periwinkle Creek to the southeast corner of the intersection. Installation of the path extension will require dedication of an easement across parcel 1's frontage along Geary Street.
Can you show me? I think I know what we're talking about. And it seems like we already have the multi-use path there.
It does, but then it terminates. There's apparently another 50 feet that would be needed on that, is what he's saying.
Where does it terminate?
We'll see if we can pull it up on it.
They,
And I would just add that the reference number for the project is on page 39 of Appendix E of the Albany Transportation System Plan. And the description on that project says widening receiving lanes on Queen Avenue, but on the intersection and install 150-foot eastbound right turn lane on Queen Avenue. Install flashing yellow arrow protected permissive left turn facing.
so on the other side, it was improved when they built those other apartments.
It's on it's along the north side of Periwinkle.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking across where they built some other apartments across Queen,
Yes,
and the path was
See
improved
how
over
that
there.
ends right there.
so I can pass this around to the commission if you'd like to see it. This shows it pretty well.
Thank you.
Sorry, but what are you exhibiting there?
So this
Okay,
is
okay.
a picture of Info Hub,
Okay,
and it talks about this is the multi-use path. And this is the property, so that's the portion that actually goes on the subject site.
Yeah, it looks like there's already a path there. I don't know if that's correct.
There's the path here, but it does cross over into the subject property.
On the property.
I was
but I
trying to
think
get
he's
some
done
info.
this done right
Pull it up here.
There's a sidewalk right there, and he wants it wider. So how would-
Can you kind of show on the,
Yeah, so
on that?
can you see where that little arrow is right there? Oh, we're not. Jeez.
Sorry, I don't have our normal setup.
Yeah, I know. This technology is great until it doesn't work.
Well, what Laura was showing you, this is correct. That's a view from Info. But our contention is that the path there needs to be widened right on the very western tip of the property that abuts Geary Street to make it as wide as the multi-use path.
So are you just talking about that very western tip? Or, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about a whole.
Yeah, way up there.
Right, and
So where this path ends, it's
Right.
like 50 feet that goes just to the north of that.
so we're just talking about an easement right at that tip, or we're talking
Yes.
about, that's it? Just-
Right along Geary Street, that little
That
bit of
little-
50-foot area right there.
Okay,
50 foot, okay.
isn't now, I believe a number of years ago, there was a car that got washed into Periwinkle Creek. And so they did, actually, they put some trees there and stuff to prevent cars from going
Yeah.
in there. But we are just talking about that one little, like, it almost looks like it's what, 20 feet or something at that very tip.
Or 50 feet, according to.
Well, okay, so you're saying that tip is 50 feet long.
Right.
Okay, and it's, right now, it's just the creek bank, is that what's there?
I think there's a bit of a sidewalk there, but it's not wide enough to be consistent with the multi-use path.
Okay, but that sidewalk would be city property, yes?
Right. That's why we would need a dedication to be able to ride it, because the city doesn't own that 10-foot strip that we're asking for.
And then what is it that is going in to make the traffic flow better? I didn't understand. What is being put in that they want that additional?
I think that they're looking at just increasing the multi-use path to just make it maybe less dangerous at that intersection for pedestrians.
Okay,
I can't
Okay.
say exactly since Ron's not here.
all right. I'm good, thank you.
I have a question. Can folks that are on, like, there's another commissioner here
Sonia? Yes.
that's online, can they see what's on this screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just, we're having a hard time seeing it. I'm just making sure everybody else can.
Looks like we have a caller that wants to ask a question. So whenever you're ready to take testimony, or if you have further questions, I'll ask you to answer those.
Yeah, okay.
Any more questions? Okay, now do we move into
Public testimony?
public testimony? Okay. So we will now take public testimony. Is that correct now, David? I want to make sure.
We are.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
From those who did not register to speak beforehand, if you would like to speak, turn on your camera and raise your hand to be called upon by the chair and unmute. If you're attending by phone, please unmute yourself, state your name so the chair can call on you to speak. So does any member of the audience wish to speak in favor of the application? If so, please state your name, address, and make any comments you may have for the planning commission. Is that person wanting to speak in favor? Active?
I don't see the hand up at the moment, but I did see it up earlier.
Does any member of the audience wish to speak in opposition or express concerns about the application? If so, please state your name, address. Excuse me, so they name, address, and make any comments you have for the planning commission. Does any member of the audience wish to speak neutrally of the application? If so, please state your name and address and make any comments you may have for the planning commission. We have no-
Doesn't appear so.
Okay. So does the applicant or staff wish to respond to any testimony presented? Since we haven't presented, I'm assuming no. Does anyone have procedural questions they would like to raise at this time? If so, please turn on your camera, raise your hand to be called upon. If you're attending by phone, please unmute yourself and state your name so the chair can call on you to speak.
There's an audience.
I'd just like to confirm that everyone had an opportunity to disclose site visits.
Oh, I did visit the site, but before I was ever on this commission. Before I knew about what was happening. Several months ago.
I've only passed by there 1,000 times.
Right, I was gonna say, it hasn't been there, right?
Right.
Just want to make sure you had the opportunity. It seemed like there might have been confusion on it. Thank you.
No other comments. I declare this public hearing closed at 6:04 PM, or that's 6:05 PM. Does the planning commission wish to discuss this case or ask questions of staff? Any more questions, staff?
I was just wondering, so far as the barrier goes, the buffer goes, can it be, does it have to be landscaping or can it be fencing?
For buffer, it would need to be landscaping,
It has to be.
shrubs, trees, a combination of those with attractive ground cover. If screening were also required, then fencing could be one method of screening on top of vegetation.
And so I do I hear a motion or suggested motion represented to us? So do I hear a motion?
I move that the planning commission recommend that the city council approves the proposed comprehensive map amendment, zone map amendment, partition, and site plan review as conditioned under planning files CP-04-22, ZC-06-22, PA-09-22, and SP-23-22 in the January 13th, 2023 staff report. This motion is based on findings and conclusions in the staff report and findings in support of the application made during deliberations on this matter.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? No further discussion. Call for the vote. We need a roll call.
You could do your vote, and if there's any abstentions or nays, then you definitely would want to do a roll call vote.
Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. So the Albany City Council will hold a public hearing on this case on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023 at 6 o'clock p.m. So where are we on the agenda? So business from the commission.
It's election time, or are we gonna wait till the 30th?
I said we're gonna wait to the 30th because we have 3 new members coming on board.
Potentially, yes. It sounds like that might be the thing to do.
Three?
Two.
2.
Yes.
Great, so we'll wait. So the hearing board's appointed.
So we're gonna be actually having a hearing board meeting on February 9th. And we have 2 hearings that afternoon. So right now, we're pretty much down to nobody on the hearings board. So we would like to see if we can get 3 members to be appointed to that.
So we need 3 members for the hearing board for February 9th. What time is the hearing board?
The hearing will start at 4 o'clock.
At 4 o'clock?
And most likely it would be in the council chambers. We have 2 conditional uses that are coming here.
What are the conditional uses?
Oh, geez.
There is, Chance is expanding to do a little barrier
Shelter.
shelter, and then there is, relief, family relief tree.
Family tree relief.
Thank you, yeah, they're proposing to do preschool down off of Bay.
That one's actually coming up later, February.
Never mind.
The other conditional use I just recall is a gymnasium that wants to use a building in the light industrial district. So that takes a conditional use.
Okay.
That's my case. will have a great deal of interest, so they could wrap up as early as 5.
Okay, I can do it.
That would be great.
Anyone else? We need 2 more.
Oh.
I can probably make it 4 o'clock on the night.
Well, that'd be great.
So Karen, myself, and so,
Okay, thank you very much on that. Appreciate that.
I'm sorry, is this new normal that that's other days besides Mondays?
Yeah, so the hearings board is really the subset of the planning commission. And we try to limit the full planning commission to cases that are more visible, you know, that have more public interest in them, for instance. But the hearings board is a good way to maximize efficiency and, you know, for minor cases that technically do require a hearing, but it doesn't necessarily warrant having a full 9-member planning commission. You know, and honestly, after the election, we need another member or 2 that's about to join the planning commission by permanent appointment to the hearings board. So that's something to think about. But any planning commission members could serve on the hearings board. So if something comes up, we can ask for a temporary appointment for somebody else.
right now, these are temporary appointments for February 19th. Okay, staff updates.
Well, we hired another planner named Liz Homestead, and she started December 30th. She's really great. Do you know who she is?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Yeah, she worked in Salem for about a year, and then before that was in Corvallis for about 3 years. Yeah, and she also had done planning for 9 years in Washington State, 2 years in Tennessee. So she took Allison Crow's planner 2 position, so she is hired on as a planner 2. She has a good deal of experience, including historic preservation. So I think that between her and Melissa Schrenz, it'll be a good, you know, working relationship there. And we're excited to start. I don't know if excited is the right word, but we are interested in moving forward with making some changes to our Article 7, which is our historic overlay. So Liz and I will be working primarily on that with some support from Melissa. And then Ann wanted me to bring up that the next meeting date for you is January 30th, and that the packets for that meeting will go out tomorrow. She's just waiting for one more document to be able to make the packet complete, and that'll be coming to you for your meeting January 30th. That's all. Do you have anything? Okay, that's all we have.
Great. So as David mentioned, the next meeting is Monday, January 30th. It's a planning commission city council work session. So we will see you then. If no other business from the commission, the meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Good night.
Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Oh, I can-